But please, if this is anything that you remember from this evening, remember this. When you come to church and you get frustrated with what's going on in church and you immediately go to, right, because that's not happening in church, I need to go out to the pastor and say, why is this not happening? You should be doing something. And when the pastor turns around and saying, well, the reason we can't do that at the moment is because this, this, and this, and this, is because, number one, the pastor hasn't been praying about that, you have. If the pastor has been praying about it, they've got all sorts of difficulties and obstacles which they are praying for and having faith for, but at the moment, it hasn't happened. And so they are as frustrated as you. And one of the interesting effects that we've seen, I've seen over the last few months and years, is when people get frustrated with the minister because the minister says we haven't got the money, they often turn around to the minister and say, you need to have more faith then. And I was thinking about it and praying about it because actually it hurt me. I think, yeah, I should. I'm letting you down. And I was listening to somebody and he said, you're not letting anyone down. You're not responsible for what God does. I thought, no, I'm not. This is a real eye-opener for me. I'm not responsible for what God does. That's quite nice. Which basically means no matter what circumstances I find myself in, it's not my responsibility for what God's doing. It's my responsibility just to trust him in the roller coaster. So anyway, but I'm doing you a disfavor if I turn around to you and say, I'll see if I can do something about that. One of the reasons why I'm doing you a disfavor is because if God has challenged you with something, he's challenging you to believe for it. And he's not challenging you to believe in me for it. And he's not challenging you to believe in the elders of the church for it. He's not even challenging you to believe in the gifts that come through the offering for it. He's not even challenging you to believe in Keith for it. He's challenging you to believe in him for it. This is not an easy message, and some people are still trying to wrap their heads around this. If I've got a frustration with the way one doctor is treating a patient, and I don't know the patient, and I see something like a relative that's got a problem, and I'm another doctor, and I go up to this doctor and say, why aren't you treating that relative? Well, the doctor says, well, I've only got a certain amount of time, 2 hands, 2 feet, a certain amount of energy, and I'm dealing with this one right now. Why don't you go and deal with that? And this doctor that's come along here has said, well, that's not very good. You should be being a better doctor than me. You're in a higher position. You should be having more power and authority and everything else. You should have more resources. I have the same amount of time in the day as you guys. I have the same amount of resources as you guys. I have the same amount of God as you guys. I don't have any more of his Holy Spirit. I don't believe in this whole teaching of we are, in some senses, vessels that get bigger and more gets poured in our buckets, and some Christians walk around as Olympic swimming pools filled with the Holy Spirit, and some people walk around as some of us feel like, and this is what I feel like, okay, like a glass of water that's a bit half empty sometimes, and that's what I feel like as I'm walking around with the Spirit. But actually, it's not about the feelings. You are given the whole of the Holy Spirit. I talk about it in another Philippians one, that it's all of it. That when the Holy Spirit is given, he's not given as an object. It's kind of like he hands out different bits and pieces. The Holy Spirit is given, it's the whole Spirit that's given. The same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead is given. So we all walk around. So I want to challenge you. I don't mean this unfairly. I don't mean to have come across critical this evening. I want to challenge you. Because one of the things that I've noticed growing up in the ministry, and I have done this to pastors myself, is there's a tendency to go out to the minister and say, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? And when the pastor turns around and gives you reasons, you turn around and say there's no faith there. It's not that there's no faith. It's that actually God's challenging each one of us to have faith for things and challenging each one of us to begin to believe in the capacity for God to move. Now, some of you are here and you're not Christians, and you just seem like I've rabbited on and talked about all sorts of bits and pieces. Let me end with a bit of biology. Diabetes. Bless him, Keith's not here this evening because his diabetes is a bit out of sync and he's on a new tablet and he's not feeling very well, so keep him in your prayers. Diabetes is an interesting disease. Diabetics. You can manage diabetes a bit by lifestyle. So in other words, you eat the right food, you do the right things and everything else, and you try and be a good diabetic. Yeah? And in being a good diabetic, you manage your diet and you manage your lifestyle and you manage your outgoing activities, you manage how much you drink, you manage how much sugar you have in your diet and all of these bits and pieces. And you have all these rules and regulations by which you live by in order that you live a good life as a diabetic. However, as a diabetic, you have one problem, which is either an insulin deficiency or a susceptibility that you resist insulin within your own system. So you actually need more insulin. And so the one thing you cannot provide for yourself is more insulin. You can do all of these things, but you can't provide the insulin. And what happens with Christianity is a bit like that. So you can live a good life, but you're still not going to make it without insulin. You're still not going to make it without the grace of God. And you can have the grace of God, but it doesn't mean you're going to live a healthy life. You've still got to live the lifestyle. So as Christians, it's all well and good appealing to God and saying, well, God gives me my insulin, so I can live however I like as a diabetic. Well, I'm afraid your feet are still going to rot. Yeah? It's still going to end up bad for you if you don't live the lifestyle. And we're called as Christians to live a godly lifestyle and receive the grace of God. And you can live a godly lifestyle but not have the grace of God. And you can have the grace of God and not live a godly lifestyle. Now, you will make it with the grace of God, but it will be by the skin of your teeth and you won't have a healthy life. Or you can live by the grace of God and live a healthy lifestyle and be a long-living Christian that has a testimony of the effect of the grace of God in a diabetic's life. Do you get me? So maybe I can kind of illustrate your need for God is not based on what you understand as good. It's not based on what you understand as a good lifestyle. It's not based on what you understand as the circumstances being better around you. Your need for God is based on the fact that you are diabetic. You are in need of the grace of God to live beyond now and to live here and now. And to live a full, fulfilled, life-abundant life. And as Christians, we're supposed to have met him, the doctor. We're supposed to have met him. And I was challenged by that Muslim guy and what he saw. And I was praying upstairs. And I said, God, give me one of those. I'd love one. I'd love you to walk in the room and shine. I am the way, the truth, and life. I think that would utterly transform us. And I think one of the reasons why it doesn't happen in our culture is because we have become so complacent about the gospel. And I felt so challenged by it. So challenged. It shook me. I thought, how dare I treat the gospel like that? How dare I treat Christ like that? How dare I be compromising? How dare I give in sometimes? It just utterly shook me. And the reason it shook me is not because of some religious fanaticism. It's because, oh my goodness, this is true. He really is God. He really has died for me. He really has saved me. He really has given his all for me. He really has provided for me. He really has involved himself in my life. He really has poured his Spirit out on me. How do I take that for granted? And I've waffled on. I'm ever so sorry. I've probably challenged you a bit too much and you're probably feeling a bit downtrodden now. It would probably be irresponsible of me not to bring a hard message sometimes. I want to challenge you all to meet Christ. To meet Christ. To pursue him. A bit like that 16-year-old boy that was that desperate for a Bible. Meet Christ. You want to see a transformation in your world? You want to have a life full of challenge, difficulty, and circumstances? You want the easy way? Don't do this. You want the hard way? You want the roller coaster? You want the ride of a lifetime? You want abundant life? You want to live a life as a Christian where you see transformation even in the midst of desperate circumstances? You want to see the healings and miracles in your generations? Do you want to see that? Then don't compromise on this. He is the way, he is the truth, he is the life. Don't compromise your Christianity. Don't give in to the necessary things around you. Fast. Fast so that you can be aware of the temptations and the temptations of the flesh and the temptations of the eye. Fast so that you can be aware. Pray about this stuff. Dig deep into the word. Chase after Jesus. And you will see him. You will meet him. You will meet him around you. You will see the effects around you. We have seen the works of God around us. We have heard God beginning to call us. But he is calling us to something far greater than a happy feeling and good church services. He is calling us to an uncompromising faith and a life in the gospel. He is calling us to be radically and brutally beaten for our faith. He is calling us to be persecuted. You know, the only time the church really explodes in the world is when it's persecuted. Yeah? China is growing at a dramatic rate because they persecuted it so hard. The church throughout history grows when it's beaten. It grows when it's hurt. It grows when its pastors are set on fire. It grows when its churches are burned to the ground. It grows because people see authenticity at that point. Your Christianity is only authentic when it's been through trials. And if you've never been through something, don't criticize somebody else's authenticity. Some of us can learn from some of these older folks that are here that have been through some incredible circumstances and their stories are almost unknown. Some of us can learn even from some of the young ones that have been through some brutal stuff at schools and it's almost unknown. Some of us can learn from one another. There's an authenticity that comes through suffering, and there's an authenticity that comes through the circumstances that are placed on us that other people would think are unwise, and we in ourselves in the midst of it think, what on earth is God is doing? Why did you do that? I just saved your life, says God. I just brought you back. So I'm going to end there. I've run over time again. I'm being naughty.